Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar this afternoon on team happiness and why it is essential nowadays. In just a second, Nic Marks, the CEO of Friday Pulse, and Mike Jones, the founder of Better Happy, are going to come on and have a discussion. I just wanted to really quickly direct you to the Q&A. If you have questions for either or both of them, please put your questions in there. And if you want to chat between yourselves or share experiences or answers, please use the chat for that. Yeah, and I hope you enjoy the webinar.
Thanks very much, Emma. Welcome, everybody. I am Nic Marks, the CEO and founder of Friday Pulse. Emma is my colleague. She'll be behind the scenes. And then Mike and I are going to have a chat now about team happiness and why it is essential these days, rather than just a nice to have. If you want to put any things in the chat, please do. But first off, I'm just going to ask Mike, because Mike is a super interesting guy. And apart from trying to compete with me about shirts, you used to be in the army, didn't you? And then you took a different path. And did you become a Buddhist monk, or did you just hang out with Buddhist monks? But then you become a happiness trainer. So perhaps just say a little bit about your story. It's fascinating.
Yeah, so first of all, yeah, I wore the shirt just for you, actually, Nic. I know you like a flowery shirt, so I wanted to compliment your style. Yeah, so I started my professional career as such in the military. So I was an army intelligence analyst, attached to the Special Boat Service, so the water version of the Special Air Service, the SAS, and physical training instructor. So yeah, I did 5 years with the military, 2 tours of Afghanistan back to back. So I spent about a year there, and when I was in my mid-20s, after I'd done 5 years, I decided to leave. I decided that job wasn't making me happy, and that it wasn't really aligned to, I didn't know it at the time, but now I know it wasn't aligned to my values, but I didn't know that. I just kind of felt this job doesn't make me happy. Yeah. So then I left, and I didn't really know what to do with myself in my mid-20s. I kind of had the career, had the good pay, and thought, well, what do I do now? So I, very cliche, went home for 2 days, put on a backpack, and said to my family, I was like, I think I'm going to go. And I just got a one-way ticket to Thailand and didn't come back for 2.5 years. During that time, I lived on a monastery. Well, I lived on multiple monasteries, actually. So I got really into Buddhism. I read a book by the Dalai Lama called The Art of Happiness whilst living in Australia, which started me down the path that I'm on today. Yeah, and ended up living on monasteries in Thailand, on the border of Burma and Myanmar, and also in the Himalayas in Nepal. Lived on a monastery there as well for 3 months with just me and a couple of monks and some kids that I was teaching English to. But in answer to your question, no, I didn't become a monk. But when I lived on the monastery in Thailand, they've basically got like levels that you can do. So you can take the 5 precepts, and you only wear white clothes, and you go on silent retreats, and you don't listen to, you don't go on phones, you don't read books, you kind of relinquish yourself of worldly pleasures. So you do, that's like one level before becoming a monk, which is a whole other level of rules and commitment, time commitment. So I did the level before, so I was in the white clothes, no external influences, I did a silent retreat, which was very challenging.
How long was the silent retreat?
Say again, sorry?
How long was it, the silent retreat?
1 week.
Wow. Yeah.
So no phones. It's not just silent. There's no books. There's nothing you're allowed to distract yourself with. So you wake up and you can meditate with the others for an hour, but you don't speak. And then you basically have 18 hours, 16 hours, however long you're awake, to just be alone with your own thoughts. And that's an interesting exercise. I can also see why solitary confinement is one of the worst punishments you can have.
Yeah. I mean, it's quite a contrast, isn't it? Moving from the army, where everything is about very tight teams, to sitting on your own for a week. Yeah. Yeah.
Although I would say my role was quite solitary. I spent a lot of time, because I was an intelligence analyst, a lot of the time I was doing stuff on my own and then presenting back to teams. So yes, you've definitely got the camaraderie piece in the military, but you do also still have the loneliness. I think that's the thing today, right? You can be lonely in a team still. So yeah.
Very interesting.
And then I'm here today. So I just kind of carried it on when I got home. That's a long story cut short.
So we're going to talk about why team happiness is essential. But if you think about happiness at work, so you said there when you were in the army that you weren't happy. I'm just wondering whether people listening in, whether they had an early job that they weren't happy in, that they moved from, like you did after 3 or 4 years. I did, actually. I mean, I came straight out of university and got the highest paying job and the most difficult job to get because I was that arrogant. I just thought I'll only go for the most difficult job, and worked at what was called Anderson Consulting then, that become Accenture. And I only hacked it for 2 years. They wouldn't let me grow my hair long. That was one problem for sure. Certainly had to do my collar up and wear a tie. Wasn't having that. No, but basically they wanted me to move all over the country, and I just got engaged. I thought I don't want to move out of London. You know, I got a job in London, and I didn't like the whole culture. So, but I did learn some good things. So first jobs are quite interesting, aren't they? So I don't know if anyone wants to put anything in the chat about one of their first jobs that they left because they're unhappy, but please do if you want to. Yeah. And Mike, so team happiness, right? So when we were planning this webinar,
yep,
said to me, it's no longer a nice to have, it's essential now. Why do you say that? What do you think that is about? Why do you think it's essential now?
So there are, I would say, two main reasons it's shifted from being a nice to have to an essential, right? So it's always made good sense to try and promote team happiness. Okay, so there are some companies that did it many years ago and they didn't have to, such as, Cadbury did a lot of stuff early on. They built Bourneville just for the staff, and they tried to make it a really good kind of culture, and they put these things in place to try and be a good place to work, essentially. And they didn't have to, but they knew it made good sense. So it's always been a nice thing to do, but it's never been an essential, because in the past, and still a little bit today, if you could give people money and enable them to trade time for money, you'd attract people, right? Because if we go back just 100 years, there was mass unemployment in the UK, and the quality of living was quite low. So it was, if you can get a job, that means you're putting food on the table. So regardless of what the quality of work is or how well we get looked after, people would queue for jobs. It's why we have the coal mines, and we don't have the coal mines today, right? There's obviously other reasons, but people won't work in those conditions the way that they used to, because they don't have to, right? They've got a choice of much better jobs. So what's happening today, I think the two things that are really making this shift go from being a nicety to a necessity is, number one, is people have a variety of choice of jobs available to them today. So last year, 2022, the BBC reported for the first time since records began, there were more job vacancies than unemployed people. So although people thought when technology came along, it was going to destroy all the jobs, actually what it's done so far is created more work, more varied work. So people aren't confined to a small selection of menial jobs. There's a wide variety of jobs in which they can choose from. So obviously that creates a new requirement for businesses to make their staff happy, because if you don't, well, they've got the allure of many competitors. So that's something new that businesses have to think about. And then the second piece is that it is the nature of our work. So again, if we go back 100 years, typically jobs were manual, repetitive labor. So, if I had a factory and I wanted to give Nick a job, I'd say, Nick, here's some money. I need you to go and do this thing on the production line. I could train you in 30 minutes, right? And then put you on the job, and you can copy somebody else, and you're going to be up to scratch in no time. Today, we live in a very rapidly changing world, right? Pretty much every single industry is having to go through unprecedented change every day. And it's likely that the speed of that change is probably only going to increase with things like AI. Technology is still getting faster. We've got a global market. Customers are demanding more. So what that means is businesses need engaged employees, because if they're not engaged, why are they going to come in and work really hard and use up that mental capacity and think about doing things differently and bounce ideas? They're just going to want to come in and do what's required of them and no more. And that in the past, that would work, but today it won't work. That means your business is going to fall behind. Think about maybe like accountancy, right? So historically and typically, accounting's been a pretty straightforward business. You do a certain amount of people's tax returns, you process them, you do maybe some bookkeeping on top and some other bits and bobs, and you get paid. Whereas today, technology's really impeding on that, because there's more and more advanced technology coming around that can almost do a lot of that process for you. So accountants are having to really adapt and change and offer more services and charge more money in order to charge more services. So they've got to be really kind of innovative and creative. So if you want your business to be innovative and creative, you need happy employees, right? If your employees aren't happy and you take ideas to them and you ask them to think of new ways of doing things, they're going to say, well, I just want to do what I already do. I don't want to have to think and take risks and do new things. So they've got a choice of jobs available to them, and we need them to be innovative and creative and collaborative. And if they're not happy and they're not engaged, they're not going to do those things. So you've got to do it in today's day and age.
Yeah, it's a big change, and I don't know. No, I don't know how, because I think I spoke to you, but there's a woman called Lucy Adams who used to be the HR director of the BBC. She'd have a tough job this week, wouldn't she? But she had tough jobs. I think it was a very exposed job. But she talks about how HR has been evolving over the last, in a shorter time frame than that, but last sort of 40, 50 years. But, you know, it went from personnel departments. So you talked about Cadbury's and the Cadbury Village. It was obviously paternalism in lots of ways, the way that Cadbury's looked after their staff. You know, we're a family, we're the head of the family, whatever they thought they were, well, they were really, you know, but it was a sort of paternalistic view. And then and probably that's how, you know, HR personnel functions were for a long time. You know, they were looking after the employees. They maybe started to introduce things like pensions and things like that, and sick leave as the 70s and 80s. But then they became business partners, and she said they moved to this role, which was quite uncomfortable for them, which she called the executioner role, which was obviously executing the business plan, but it was also effectively executing jobs, because, you know, 1 in 7 people were laid off in 2008 or whatever it was. It was a huge culling, and of course HR was doing that. So I'm wondering how you think trust is in that situation now. Now we're moving into the situation where she talks about moving from being, you know, an adult to child relationship turns us into being adult to adult. You know, how do we look at each other in the eye as an organization and whatever like that? And is happiness a way that we can do that, can actually make a new psychological contract, if you want to use that word, between the employer and the employee?
Yeah, I mean, the HR question is interesting, right? Because whose responsibility is employee engagement? Whose responsibility is employee happiness?
Yeah.
Is it HR's responsibility? And I think HR is an interesting space to watch. I mean, when I think of HR, and I work at lots of different companies, I think of process and strategy and the implementation of process. I feel like that's kind of where they're being pushed into. But I do also feel like they are the ones that end up kind of being looked at when it comes to employee happiness, employee engagement. I think people kind of look to HR, but nobody's explicitly said it, like, you're responsible for this thing. But we kind of like just look at them and go, shouldn't you be sorting this out? In regards to the relationship, it's an interesting one. So I think people want to, you know, what last year the data from LinkedIn showed that when people are looking for a new job and they're looking for the culture of a company, the top thing last year that they would look for is opportunities to learn and grow. So that's gone from being 9th, which in like 2019, only a few years ago, up to number 1. So I think people are still looking to be kind of guided in that paternal aspect. You know, they still want to go in and learn and develop and grow. I think that's a really important piece. And really we learn from people that we see as more advanced than us, or more senior than us, or more experienced than us. So I think that aspect's still there. But I think people also, well, we know from the data, right, that people also really want to influence strategy. They want to make a difference. They want to know that they can affect change in the business. They want to know that their voice is heard, that they're valued. So it's both, right? You've got to have this paternal piece that makes people feel cared for, looked after, and gives them the opportunity to learn and grow and become the best version of themselves. But then also we want to have this relationship where people feel like they get to influence the strategy and share those ideas. So it's a bit of both. I guess it's being a parent that listens.
Yeah, maybe it's the wrong analogy, but it's, you know, it's definitely changing. It's definitely changing with the younger generation as well, in the sense that, I mean, you must work with, because maybe say a little bit about what you do in your day job, actually, because, you know, I know, but maybe people don't. Yeah.
So I typically, we go into businesses and we work on the culture and we work on development of the staff, really with 3 key aims to drive up the levels of happiness or engagement. I mean, our brand, same as you, right, better, happier. Ultimately, we want our people to be happier. So we see that if you drive up engagement, if you look after well-being, and you make sure that there's growth without burnout, those 3 things, you're doing a pretty good job, right? So people are well, physically and mentally. People are getting results without feeling like they're burning out. people are enjoying their work. If you can do those three things well, then we are onto a winner, because most companies are going to find, big and small, that one of those is missing, right? The smaller companies, typically high levels of burnouts, people care about their work, they can influence change, they feel engaged, but we all work too much because we're so close to the core of it that we're willing to kind of sacrifice ourselves, and typically the owners are working too hard, and that passes down. In the larger companies, you tend to see the engagement piece drop off, but maybe the burnout piece isn't such an issue, but it is still an issue as well. Typically, we'll go and train managers and leaders because I believe that's where the issues start and where the most positive impact can be had. So we'll go in and in person do training around how do you remain physically and mentally healthy whilst you've got the challenges and stresses of a job and running a team? How do you keep yourself motivated at work? How do you motivate your team at work? How do you make sure you're getting results and not just working loads of overtime and feeling stressed all the time? So we do training around those three areas in order to help people be happy at work, in order to make sure that our best assets, which is our passion about our work, doesn't become our worst enemy. Because when you're passionate about your work, you're more at risk of getting burnt out and stressed out and losing your work-life balance. So that's what we typically do. We recommend like measuring what matters. So like Friday Pulse is fantastic because it's like, look, if you want to improve these things, you've got to measure them. You know, businesses throughout the past have always measured sales, they've measured marketing, they've measured new customer interactions, customer lifetime value. We've measured customer satisfaction. You know, we measured the quality of our product, R&D, but what we've not done is measured employee happiness, employee engagement, and whatever you want to term it, because we haven't had to, right? Because if we're paying people, they'd stay there. Whereas today it's like, no, people don't have to work for you anymore, and people aren't just willing to exchange time for money. So you need to measure this thing to make sure that you're doing a good job on it. Otherwise, you're going to have a constant headache of crappy retention, and which leads to you firefighting and unnecessary absence and low levels of productivity.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, whenever I look at the data on it, I always see that fair pay enters the equations, as in, do people feel they're paid appropriately for the level of effort and work they do? But actually, absolute level doesn't enter the equation. You know, so it's much more about, do you feel you're paid fairly for what you do? So, but if you're not treated fairly, then I don't know how you find this, because do you sometimes go into any quite difficult environments where there's a lot of conflict and stuff like that, you know, where people might not be?
I think more common is the lack of conflict as an issue. I think you've got a couple of, if you've got yeah, so I think you go into teams where you've got maybe a leader who's, and it's normally unintentionally, right? This is an important thing to understand. So anybody that's got a business here or is in a leadership or management position, often it's us, those in those leadership and management positions, that are perceived as difficult. We're perceived as being very abrupt or blunt, or people perceive us as being difficult to approach. And we don't actually mean it. It's not that we actually mean that. That's how the way our minds work. We're to the point, we're systematic. And then what happens is people don't share with you how they're feeling. And then that creates a culture of gossiping and kind of passive aggressiveness, and people just generally not being open about how they feel. And I think that's what I see as more of a problem than just an all-out fight where people are just at each other's necks all the time. So very rarely is that a thing that I see. And I guess that I'm sure those teams exist, but I don't think they bring me in.
Yeah, maybe they don't exist for long because it gets too hot that it explodes. But yeah, that sort of cold, passive aggressive is interesting, because effectively, if I go back to like sort of the principles or the way that emotions work, that if people are frightened, freeze is a really good response. You know, you keep your head down, you say nothing to sort of keep out the way or whatever like that. So if you've got a culture where it's not safe to speak up, then people don't speak up. And then I go
a step further and say it's not even that it's not safe. It's like, it's got to be encouraged, right? Because most of us, our standard attitude is avoid conflict. Like, it feels uncomfortable. I don't want to say no. I don't want to question that thing. I don't want to question the boss. So most of us, our standard setting is to just avoid conflict and get on with it, which is okay at a team level, but at a management or leadership level, that can very quickly lead to you getting overloaded with work, becoming stressed, not picking the right things, taking on too much. So sorry to interrupt you, but I'd say, yeah, not only should it be safe, it should be actively encouraged. I think if you've got a team and there's no conflict, that's not a good sign, that's a bad sign, right?
no, you're quite right to interrupt, and we can, and I agree with you. So we can't quite have a conflict about this, which is disappointing. But I'm actually really interested in this because I think we don't speak enough about this, which is what is how do you train people to sort of respectfully disagree? How do you sort of bring that out in a team and encourage that?
I do. I think that's essential, especially if we think about the general political message that we all live in today with the internet. So it's gone very much, the general message is, don't say anything offensive. And if you do, you can like have the wall, the rug pulled from underneath you. You can get, if you look at it in the famous, amongst famous people, they say one wrong thing and then career's gone, even if it wasn't said out of malice. So what we've got is this kind of culture developing where it's like, don't say anything offensive, which it's good to encourage people not to be idiots. But I think when you've got people that are scared of speaking and saying how they feel, it's really bad for your culture, because as what that leads to is people don't talk about how they're feeling. So then the leaders and the leaders, managers, owners, whoever it might be, they just get yeses. And then if they're making mistakes, the team aren't telling them. So it's bad for innovation. It's bad for productivity. The teams end up actually resentful because they're not talking about how they feel. And it just creates this vicious downward spiral. So I actively train people to engage in conflict, and I actively train people that conflict isn't bad. You can disagree with somebody without hating them. And it's actually a sign of emotional intelligence. One of the things that I think managers really struggle with, new managers especially, but even managers that have been managers for a long time, is before you get to a leadership or management role, you kind of get recognized and respected for getting on with work, for getting on with everybody, for not causing any trouble, for taking on as much work as possible, and for generally avoiding conflict when you're in a team. But when you're in a management role, you're going to carry on with that behavior because it's what you've learned, but that's going to create issues. If you've got team members that aren't living the values of the team and you're not addressing that, well, that's an issue. Other people then think, well, that person's not being addressed, so why bother doing it? It creates issues at your team level in regards to your peers, right, and your senior team, because they might say, right, we need to do this project, and you're sat there going, well, that doesn't make any sense. But if you're scared to challenge it, then you're going to do this project knowing it's not right for the business because you avoided the conflict, and then it's bad for the business, it's bad for the team, it's bad for you. So yeah, I think we do have to actively encourage it. And if you look at the best teams in the world, they do have healthy conflict. So it's something I think politically we're getting pushed away from. And we're scared of, and I don't think it's good for happiness. That's why I hate when we have all this messaging around don't say anything that could offend anybody, and it's a strange concept. Don't be an idiot, of course not. But if you're scared to say what you think, that's not good for you or good for your team or good for your business or good for your overall happiness.
Yeah, it's such a difficult balance. And actually, just seeing Belinda's here written in the chat, she goes, with social media, I think more people hide behind that to say horrible things, which cause conflict, but with no accountability. So the accountability that you're raising there, Belinda's right, isn't it? It's like healthy conflict. We stand in who we are, don't we? And we say, and we take a risk, but we stand in what we believe in, and then we debate it. And when we can agree, we can sometimes be surprised what we get back, can't we? Because we often learn things when we start getting into debate with people.
Yeah, no, exactly that. And I think this is the thing, right? If we have regular conflict, healthy conflict, we learn that it's a learning experience and it's a growth experience. But if we don't have it, then we fear it. So then when we do have those small moments where we go into it, we get the fight or flight raise up, and we get all these emotions that we don't like. So it's a muscle that's got to be developed. Really, it's no different to going to the gym. If you're not having regular healthy conflict, then it's something you've got to learn and develop. Otherwise, you're just going to not have a good culture. Yeah.
In fact, there's a growth consultant that we work with, and he tells me I'm too in favor of harmony and not enough. So I think this is a learning edge for me as someone, is that I prefer it when we all agree, but clearly sometimes you have to make a tough decision, or someone disagrees with you, and actually that opens a door, doesn't it? Because then you can see something new.
I think that's the value of you've got to have a vision, right? And you've got to have a clear picture of what you're trying to achieve in your team, in your life, in your business. And then if you've got that vision painted out, and it doesn't have to be crystal clear, but you kind of like, this is where we're heading, so this is where we're heading with Friday Pulse, then that invites debate, right? Because when you've got decisions to make as a team, you've got this vision that you're all in line with, and then we're like, well, is that right for the vision? And so might say yes, and you might say no, and then you'd be like, well, why? And you tell me why. Well, I think A, B, C, D, E, and you go, well, that's interesting, I think this, and then you weigh it up and you come to conclusions. The fascinating thing about so like I encourage a process called objective key results, which is where teams get together at least once a quarter, plan what they're focusing on for the next 3 months, and it forces them to prioritize, which is a big thing that people struggle with, right? With modern life, modern businesses, about the disciplined pursuit of less. It's not the businesses that can do the most that win, it's the ones that can do the few things better. And when you've got that going on, it forces you as a team to prioritize down and to get really specific on what it is that you're trying to achieve. And the fascinating thing is that, and there's data to show this, that people don't actually care that much if their ideas get implemented. They care if their ideas get heard. So if you have a team meeting and you're like, right, we're going to choose what we focus on for the next 3 months, and Mike's there, and Mike says, I really want to do this thing here, and I get to explain it, and then we all have an input, and then we come to the conclusion that we're not doing that thing, I'm actually, generally speaking, the data shows this, going to be quite engaged still, because I've had my input, even if it didn't get listened to. So a lot of people, I think, fear that if they get their teams involved, then they're going to try and take over. But actually, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't follow those ideas, and if they're the best ideas, you will, but if they're not, you won't. Just the fact that they've been heard is what matters. The most frustrating thing is when people don't have their ideas heard.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And there's a lot of work, I don't know if you heard of the work on procedural justice, that basically in a justice system that people, there's two ways to think about justice. One is the outcome. Does the outcome feel just? But then does the procedure feel just? And actually people can accept an outcome they don't agree with if they feel the procedure was fair.
Same thing.
Yeah. So so it is, that those are two different ways of looking at it. I mean, that's super. I really like this idea that actually that vision holds it together, so that in a sense that actually that's your North Star. Some people talk about North Stars, don't they? About, how you can keep on that path, and it's how you do that, how you achieve your business goals, but in a way that creates a happy, flourishing team at the same time. Yeah. I'm wondering, so about different personalities in teams. So obviously there's a lot of work in the 90s and 2000s about psychometrics, Myers-Briggs, headmasters and stuff, and people were kind of looking for what's the magic combination of people in a team that makes it gel. I don't actually think that's been proved at all. And I know Google did this big project, the Aristotle project, where they basically thought that's what they were going to find, and then they didn't find it. But having said that, still, how do you find different personalities with working with happiness, I
think there's some validity in doing the personality profiling. It's something that we do, but what the personality profiling doesn't take into account is people's values, right? So Nick and Mike could have, which we don't, by the way, we could have exactly the same profile, but we might have completely different values. So that's something that they kind of don't really dig into, because I might be the perfect fit on paper in regards to skill set for your team, but if my values aren't aligned, then we're not going to get along, and there's going to be a lot of friction. Whereas I could not be a great fit for your team in regards to my skills and what you need at the moment, but if I'm super aligned to your values, I'm still going to be useful in your business. You're still going to utilize me to make growth and profit. So that's something that's kind of skipped over that I think is really important to understand. You are seeing a lot more businesses now recruit on personality and fit as opposed to just skills. And there's a few businesses that are big businesses that I do work with, and they're seeing that it's having a massive positive impact. Like they've had this huge shift away from, we can train someone in the skills, but we can't make somebody fit the culture. So if we find people that fit the culture, we'll train them in the skills, and they're likely to stick around for longer. And it's really working. It's been proven in that space. So I think that's probably something that's really worth considering. There's lots of different tools. You've got DISC, you've got Myers-Briggs, you've got Colby, you've got Strengths, High Five. The list goes on. I think it's good to do one or two of them just to get an idea. And it's one of the reasons it's really good as well is people like to talk about themselves and they like to learn about themselves, and we don't make time for that in work because we've got so many work tasks to do. So if you just take the team for a simple profile thing and sit and talk about it, people love that. It's going to drive engagement up. Engagement, I mean, I like to say engagement, but happiness, same thing really. Do I enjoy going to work? And I saw an interesting thing once, and I teach this in our workshops, that an engaged employee is one who's emotionally committed to the business. So not just somebody that's there to get paid, but they genuinely care and want to make it better. But it's a two-way relationship, right? And that relationship will be maintained if they feel like the business genuinely cares about them. You've got that two-way dynamic, the relationship goes on. But if they genuinely care about the business, but then 6 months down the line feel that the business doesn't genuinely care about them, then it starts to break off, and vice versa. If you're doing loads to your employees, but they're not really giving back, the relationship breaks off. So things like profiling are really good for that as well, not just for getting the right people, but for showing people that you care about them and help people develop.
Yeah. But do you find that extroverts, introverts just take that very easy split, maybe even age split, to older people have more, I'm going to say, resistance? Having said that, I'm an older person these days, so I don't, but do you find that sort of generational stuff goes on in teams,
when it comes to happiness, or just in general?
Well, when it comes to happiness, like, do you find people, I mean, I think sometimes we find maybe older line managers are less open to sort of thinking about this than younger ones. I don't know whether you find that.
Well, I think probably the main thing to consider is you've always, in most businesses, you will have team members that are kind of a bit older. They've been doing the role for a while and they're kind of happy the way it is. And they're going to stay there until they retire, and that's that. So are they going to be as excited about measuring happiness and doing development training? And no, they're just going to see it as something they don't really need, and that's a bit of extra effort. So, but you're always going to have people like this in any business, right? There's another profiling tool you can use called motivational maps, and they're what you call defenders. They like structure, they like stability, they like routine, and it's fine, right? We need those people in our business. They're reliable, they're loyal, they're consistent. You just got to think about how you approach them, right? And typically for growth, like you and I are very growth minded. We've got ideas. We're like, what's the problems? How can we make the world better? And, so very entrepreneurial mindset. So and lots of business owners and managers and leaders are, right. So we look at the world through a slightly different lens to other people. So for us, it's like, problems are exciting because we can come up with these great solutions and make things. And then we're like, God, I can't see how this wouldn't work. And we throw it out there. And then when other people take it and they're like, it's a bit of effort that, and I don't know if it's going to work, that can really drain us. And we're like, what's wrong with you? And I think for business owners, that can be a real challenge. But all it is they're just a different profile to you. So you've just got to think about how you sell it to them. You've got to get them bought into the ideas. And even if you haven't got older staff, you probably will have some people that are that mindset on your team. They're not as excited about the growth. And it doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means they think differently to you. So when it comes to them, I would say you've got to, even with something as like Friday Pulse, right? You're going to have to sell it to those people. Okay, so I've got, I'm making up a name here. I've got Sarah. She's been here for a long time. She's pretty set in her way. She's great. She's reliable. She's not really into any of the changing stuff, but she's part of the team. So I'm bringing in Friday Pulse, for example, and I think Sarah's going to go, okay, that's a bit of effort. So I've got to sell it to her. I've got to show her why it's going to make her job better. I've got to tell her why it's good for the business because she cares about the business. I've got to tell her why it's good for the team. Showing her the actual, talking to her in a business sense might help. It might be, if we know this, then we know we can prevent issues earlier, which means people aren't going to leave, which means you're not going to have to keep covering that admin stuff, So it's selling it to those people, I think, and not just seeing them not jumping on it as excited as you do as a negative.
Yeah.
But you do also have people in teams that are negative, right? That's another thing we've got to be realistic about. You do have people that are they're set in their ways. They don't want anything to change. They fight any change because they're just thinking from their own selfish perspective. And you've got that as well. And sometimes, you have to out with the old, in with the new. It's just one of the harsh realities of business.
Well, and often they've been let down before, over-promised things, often things. But yeah, I mean, the late Tony Shea, who I knew a bit, who used to run Zappos, he used to say that if you hire for culture, ultimately you have to fire for culture, which I guess is true because if
what got you here won't get you there sometimes.
Yeah. So yeah. So returning to our theme, right? So if teams don't embrace happiness, what do you think is going to happen to them over the next 10 years? If organizations don't, if they don't embrace, whether we call it happiness, whether we call it, making great jobs for people, whatever language we do, is people enjoying their work, feeling an emotional connection to it. What do you think is going to happen to those organizations that don't embrace it?
So you've got two types of organization. This is a gross simplification. You've got two types of organization. So you've got a reactive organization.
Yeah.
Okay. So which is just going from solving problems, then back to normal, then a little bit of growth, then everybody fights it, and then back to normal. And it's what you call oscillation, right? It's not enjoyable. It's not enjoyable for the owner or the leader or the managers and the leadership team, because it feels like it's an uphill battle. It just feels like sometimes we make a change and then we go back. And then things get worse, and then all of a sudden we figure out we make something better, and everyone's happy, and then everyone starts moaning, and we go back to normal. So you've got an organization of oscillation, and the reality is that's what we're hardwired to be like as humans. We are inherently lazy. We do fear change. We will fight to kind of get things back to normal. It's what we do because it feels safe. It's from our evolutionary brain and mind. And then you've got a growth culture, right, which is the other category. And these are the organizations and the businesses where we make progress and we feel like we're ahead of the curve, and business is enjoyable. And yes, we still make mistakes, but actually, generally speaking, people enjoy coming to work. We enjoy the challenge, and we feel like new things are being implemented. And work fills us with a sense of meaning and joy. Still hard. Happiness is hard, right? That's an important thing to get across. It's not just this thing that lands on your feet. You have to work for it. So if you stay if you don't prioritize happiness and think about how you're going to engage people and think about how you're going to be known as a great place to work, you'll still survive depending on your industry, for a period of time, and maybe for a long period of time, but you're going to stay in that feeling like business is an uphill battle, and it's just not going to be rewarding. Generally speaking, you're going to, all the changes that come along, which are coming, they're only going to speed up these changes. You're going to perceive them as stress. If you're in the second category and you're ahead of the curve by doing things like this and focus on being a great place to work as well as growing, because it's not just about making your employees happy, it's about being a good business as well, because part of being happy is being part of a culture that's growing or at least improving. Then it's going to go from feeling like a lonely uphill battle to a rewarding team challenge, right? It's still hard. Like, I'm not going to sit here and go, start focusing on happiness and business will just be easy. It's still a challenge, but the challenge will feel enjoyable. I felt this was summarized really well in a book called, I think it's called The Art of Impossible by Stephen Kotler. It's definitely Stephen Kotler. And he said, he's a neuroscientist, and he shows you that when humans face a problem on their own, it releases stress chemicals in the body. We get stressed, right? If we've got a problem that we've got to come over, we get stressed. But when we face challenges with other people, it releases feel-good chemicals. It's like just the difference between doing it on your own and doing it in a team goes from being stressful on the body negatively to feel good, exciting, endorphin releasing. And I think the problem is in the modern world is you've got the digital aspect that have come in, and a lot of people are in businesses, in teams, doing stuff on their own. Yeah, they don't feel that connection piece. Yeah, okay, I'm in the office with Nick, but we're not connected, and I'm dealing with all this stuff on my little reality screen over here on my own, and I'm stressed. So that's a big issue that I think businesses are facing at the moment, which, big thing you talk about in Friday Port, connection, right? The reality is, unless we have something in place to remind us to do that, and this is a really important mindset piece for anybody that's listening to this webinar. When you're not doing this stuff, right, you're not spending enough time with your team, you're not bringing people together, you're not rewarding people or whatever it might be, right? When you're not doing these basic things, it's not done out of malice. And this is what people tend to think, they're like, oh, the businesses are exploiting the employees and they don't make it a nice place to work. And that's not a thing that's done out of malice. It's not like people just sat there going, right, I'm just going to work my team really hard and not speak to them. It's human nature, right? Our nature is to try and solve problems, and businesses are a never ending list of problems. And you solve a problem and then you have 10 more waiting for you, right? And then you fix that problem and that leads to 10 more. So it's not done out of malice. It's just human nature. Our human nature is to solve those problems, and we get busy with that because there's always a list of them waiting for us. And what happens is employee happiness, personal health, spending time with our families, developing our teams. These are all what we call Q2 activities, right? They're not urgent, but they are important. So they just get pushed down the list. and we're thinking about them. We're like, oh, I know I should do this, but I've got 17 emails from clients waiting for me, and I've got the roof's falling on that site down there, and Tanya in accounts has had a death in the family, so we've got to look after that. And there's just always these issues going on. So this team happiness piece gets just pushed down the agenda, as does your own health, as does spending time with your family. And what that leads to is work being a negative for everybody. And that's a problem. And when we look at it, the reality is that for most people in the UK, work is a negative. Business owners, CEOs, MDs, team leaders, team members. The reality is for most people, and the data shows you, work comes as a negative. 9% of employees from Gallup, they suggested, are engaged at work. So that's, in theory, 91% are just going to get paid.
I would dispute those figures a bit, but I'm not very keen on the Gallup definition of it.
Because they're your competitor.
No, nothing to the competitor, actually. It's the hard statistical stuff. So basically, you talk about engagement, they talk about engagement. You can't measure engagement directly, because if I ask you how engaged are you at work, well, you might be able to give me an answer, okay, but most people wouldn't be able to. Don't understand what the concept. They particularly don't know what the top of the scale would be.
Yep.
So what's the fully engaged? Is that available 24/7, always prepared to go the extra mile? So there's burnout territory there.
Yep.
Whereas if you ask people how happy they are, there's a natural optimization that goes on, because if you're working too much, you get unhappy. If you're working too little, you get unhappy because you're bored. So you get into an optimization thing. So statistically, asking people how happy you are is a better measure of engagement than engagement, because it really picks up the fact everything is around trade-offs and optimization. It also goes up and down. The reason that we ask weekly in Friday Pulse is because you can have good and bad weeks, and the idea is to have more good weeks where
and I love that, right? And I think most tools don't do that. It's like once a quarter or once every 6 months. And what if they feel good on that day, but they didn't feel good for the rest of it? So I think the weekly is a really kind of fantastic USP, and the way that you guys present it is bang on.
But if you ask people also, so when you ask people in surveys, so let's say you do, like we do a weekly one, so you've got data running through time, but if you do one once a year, like that, you're doing a cross-sectional survey, and you can't track those things, but you can compare groups well, and you can see what's going on. But another way that people do it is what's called day reconstruction methodology, which is, how was your yesterday? What went well in it? What will you enjoy doing? And then work really does come near the bottom. That basically people start saying, well, of all the things I did yesterday, it was the least enjoyable. But of course, it's essential for living. So there's a trade-off that goes on with that too. But yeah, so I'm not very keen on the Gallup data, because basically they just ask 12 questions, they average the scores, and they have a cut-off. And
obviously they've got their own bias as well of what they're trying to get people to spend money on. And
we're trying to make a buck in the world, but but I just statistically I don't like it. Because they're basically measured drivers rather than outcomes. And so having a good outcome measure, like how happy were you this week, you then know. This is a bit like you're saying about values earlier about conflict. If you've got a strong North Star, you can see, I see your argument why you should do this, because that might take us there better. It's the same if you've got a good measure of happiness. It's like, well, you can see, is that actually going to make us a better team? We can try that. We can measure it. We can see if it affects us, because we know where we're going. What we want to do is be happy and successful. I would say, you want the two of them. And Friday Pulse is here to help you and support you become more successful, but it's focused on the happiness piece of it, which is the bit that we're experts on and can offer something. But yeah, so that was me conflicting Gallup, if not you, at least.
But it's important, right? These are important things to discuss, because business owners and team leaders and managers, they get told to look after this stuff, and then we're still figuring out how to measure it. And in some places, and a lot of the stuff that's widely accepted isn't actually very good. And that's always the way, right? People rush to market, they come out with these things, they make them popular. And a great example is the unconscious bias stuff. I was reading about that, and it was kind of like, you need to do unconscious bias training for your team. And it was widely kind of accepted, and billions of pounds spent on this unconscious bias training. And I can't remember the company that I was researching, but they basically just released a paper saying, this is this new thing that we're doing, and we're doing this new thing because we've been doing unconscious bias training for 5 years. We've done it to this many thousands of people, and we've come to the conclusion with all the data that it doesn't actually work or do anything. And then so now we're doing this new thing. So it's important to look at the widely accepted norms and be like, okay, well, that's you know, so that's the way people are measuring engagement, and again, it's got the Gallup name attached to it, but does it actually work? You know, that's still an important question to ask.
Yeah. And there's all sorts of stuff, you know, well-intentioned interventions around well-being, happiness that don't work, you know, and I think particularly
most. Yeah.
I don't know. There was a very good paper, Emma, I'm not sure if you're going to find this that quickly, David Fleming at the Oxford Research Centre, and he basically did some work showing that I can put a link this in the follow-up email, showing that most well-being interventions to individually based don't work at all. So resilience training actually seem to make people less happy. You know, and in a sense, if it's in an organization where they're stressing you out Monday to Friday lunchtime and then giving you an hour meditation, it's not really gonna.
Yeah, it's crap. It's crap. Let's be honest, it's crap, right? And
that's a more technical definition.
That's my technical definition. That's my statistician coming out. And I base everything we teach about happy, and it's so aligned to the components of Friday Pulse. It's actually how we came across each other on my experiences of traveling and seeing different cultures and seeing, you know, so when I lived in Nepal, people very healthy. They've got less than us, but they're very healthy and they're very happy. And I was like, well, that's interesting because they've got less money than us. They've got less opportunity than us, but generally speaking, from the people I lived when I saw, they have a better quality of life and they have better levels of life satisfaction. And why was this? And it's this community piece. So it's just part of their environment, right? They live in an active environment. They only eat healthy foods because that's all available to them. But they don't do that because they have to. They do that because that's what's in their environment. They're connected to people. Their lives are hard, which gives them meaning and passion, meaning and purpose, because they work on these things together. And then in the UK and in other developed countries, it's kind of like, well, we've made it really easy for you to be unhealthy. So the environment supports that. And many of the jobs are still just based on, we'll pay you and you do this repetitive task. And less people are religious now. So people have just been left with this spiritual kind of gap. And I did some research on the Blue Zone solutions as well. And you see the same thing, the world's longest lived communities. It's not they go to the gym and they meditate or anything like that. So they spend time in a community. They feel that they belong. Often they're religious, but they have some kind of spiritual thing that they're working towards as a community. So it's not gyms and meditation and the world's healthiest diet that are making people healthy and happy. It's being in a community. So this connection piece, about happy, we say tribe, meaning and purpose. So this is pretty much some of the components that you list in Friday Pulse, right? So are people connected to each other? Do people feel like they've got meaning and value in their life? Do they feel like they're able to contribute? And then an added bonus is, can we create an environment that supports them to be healthy? But what I think businesses do, and what we all tend to do, is we look at issues and then we try to we look at symptoms and we try to address them. So it's like, well, people are stressed. Okay, so we need to do resilience training. It's like, well, if you go deeper in that, why are they stressed? It's because they don't feel like they've got support at work. They're not part of the team. They're making those decisions on their own. You know, it's like dig deeper and you'll find that it always tends to come back to, do they feel like they've got meaning and value? Are they connected to other people? Have they got this purpose that they can contribute towards? And this is the beautiful thing, right? Because in the developed Western world, where are people going to find that from? Because we all need it. All humans end up wanting to make a difference. You know, we know that when people don't work, they end up being unhappy, right? Or they go into charity work or something because it's what's within you, right? So where in the modern world, where we're less religious, we're less connected to our local communities, we go out less, where are people finding that? They're finding it from their work. Because if you go to a work, and this is why having values, having a vision, having a mission is becoming more and more and more important, right? Because people are looking to work, not just to get paid, but to fulfill that spiritual need within them, whether they know it or not. That's what we know they are looking for.
Yeah, it was sort of always been there. I'm looking towards the last 5 minutes, and if anyone's got any questions for Mike, please put them in, or maybe are they there, Emma, and I can't see them, but
no, we have I know that Helen, you had your hand raised, so if you have a question, please do add it to the Q&A section. If you wanted to
read in the chat,
or you add it to the chat if that's easier for you, Helen, please do go ahead. And if anybody else has a question, please also add that to the chat now. Oh, here we go. Oh, it was a mistake. That's fine.
Nikki's thing that she's putting.
Yeah, if anybody else has a question.
Assuming that's a she, because Nikki's a boy's name as well, right? I got told.
Double K normally, but never know.
Yeah, so Nikki says, I got told I wouldn't think too much outside the box. I felt stifled and unmotivated. I don't see the box, but if I did, it would be a box, but something else. Challenging functional fixedness. We have business values, but they feel like they're just words.
Yeah, companies not living their values and not, it's like, I'm booked to do a talk and I asked about their company values and they got to 3 out of the 5 and then they had to look them up. And so I think lots of companies, they have these and they're really decent words, but it's actually, how do you live them? How do you bring them into people's everyday work? And I think before that has to come your vision, because I look at values as, I like to look at it all as a journey, right? So that your business is really a journey. Any business, it's like, we are here and we're trying to get to this new reality, which is the vision. That's the thing that we want to do, the difference we want to see in the world. So that's the vision, and the mission is kind of what's our unique way of doing that? What's the three things we're going to do better than any other business? And then your values are, how are we going to compose ourselves along the way? How are we going to behave? And how are we going to go about this journey? And if you haven't got that vision piece, then I think the values piece doesn't work very well. And then it does end up just being a kind of, we need some values, so let's write 4 buzzwords: loyalty, integrity. let's write those words on the wall and never talk about them again. But if you've got that vision, then it all comes into context. But then you also need the system around it. You need to be meeting at least quarterly to plan, and then bringing those values into your PDPs, bringing those values into your planning sessions. It should be seen as a tool, not as a necessity. Yeah, as that sort of guiding thing, which helps with everything. So as we go into the last 5 minutes, so Emma, could you do so this is just us asking you whether you've enjoyed this webinar, whether you recommend it. So it's the classic Net Promoter Score question, but I do collect them just to see which webinars seem to work better and to learn from how we do it. So please do vote now and do that. So Mike, so this idea that we're not religious anymore, that we look for that at work in a way, I find really interesting, and I guess that's coming out of your Buddhist side too. But it's an interesting switch, isn't it? And this really goes back to our core question, really, isn't it? Which is that this has stopped being a nice to have. It's sort of becoming an essential, isn't it? That actually people really do work now for more than the money, don't they?
Yeah, I think whether you class yourself as religious or not, whether you class yourself as spiritual or not, we know that humans crave meaning and purpose in their life, and that's typically why religion has been so popular, because it gives us that. It helps us provide some kind of context to what could be seen as the meaningless existence that is life, right? So it's kind of like, well, why are we here? And it's like, well, religion gives me a purpose, and it's genuinely, I think, again, there's data to prove that happiness is generally higher when people are religious, and depression is generally lower, because it's fulfilling that spiritual need. It's given us something to pursue that's bigger than us. And we know that when we just get obsessed with us, that can lead to neurosis, right? And lead to us being unhappy. So I think whether you class yourself as spiritual or religious is irrelevant, right? You're a human being, and you strive to have meaning and purpose in your life. And when you have meaning and purpose in your life, you feel good. And I think generally speaking, in the UK at least, like the people are less religious. I think the internet and technology is generally making people less interested in religion. So I think what's going on is we've got a lot of spiritual bankruptcy, but people don't know it, right? They're spending time on their computers. They've got a relatively comfortable life, because we know that the struggle of life provides meaning as well. So if we've got something to struggle, and then it forces us to work together as a community. So if we didn't have enough money coming in, then the family has to work together and figure it out. And even though we don't want that struggle gives us meaning. Something I noticed in Nepal, like the struggle of life unites the community. So I think we're at this new place where actually, especially for the kids of today, it's kind of like, no, there's nothing to worry about. You've got money, you've got all these nice gadgets, and there's going to be a recession. So that's, of course, changing the message slightly. But generally speaking, life is, even with a recession, way better than it's ever been. So where are people finding that meaning and that purpose? And do they even know that they want it? I think often they don't. And they've got the option of comfort, got the option of more comfort than ever before. And when we take that too much, and when we're too comfortable for too long, we know that we end up unhappy. Look at people that are unemployed and they can survive off the money that they're given from the government. You know, we know that they end up unhappy, generally speaking, not all of them. So we do crave meaning and purpose, whether we think we're spiritual or not. And if you can figure that out in your business, and you can figure out, and it doesn't matter, this is a really important point, right? It doesn't, people might hear this and be like, oh man, you know, we're an accountant, so we can't do that. You know, we're not saving the world or anything like that. But you've got to get out of that mind of thinking. When we say people mean search for meaning and purpose, it doesn't need to be that you're restoring the Amazon rainforest or anything like that, or preventing climate change. It just means that you're doing something meaningful through your business, which you would do, otherwise it wouldn't exist. Maybe not if you're an arms dealer, but generally speaking, businesses are achieving some kind of positive thing in the world. And that positive thing will mean a lot to a lot of people, including your customers. So it's just being clear on that. And I think business owners or people in the senior echelons they're so close to what they do, they don't see the value in it. They don't see how powerful that could be to people that want to come and work for them, and they play it down.
Yeah.
Like Friday Pulse is a great example, right? You know, I mean, we've probably got the same, very similar vision, right? And I believe that if you can improve happiness, you're going to make the world better, because people are going to be less sick. The NHS is going to be less strained, because most of it comes from people just not being happy, right?
Yeah.
You're going to have better productivity in your businesses. So you're solving a huge, meaningful problem. So if you can like get clear on that and talk about it, you'd be amazed at the quality of people that are just going to want to work for you just for that.
Brilliant. We're going to have to end there, but thank you, Mike. I really enjoyed this conversation. So Mike is from Better Happy. I'm obviously Nic from Friday Pulse, and we'll send a follow-up email afterwards. But where we meet and where we possibly collaborate is that you know, Mike works with teams and we build a tool for teams, and we're very, very aligned on our North Stars, aren't we?
Yep.
So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you especially to Mike for coming. Thank you, Emma, for running the things behind the scenes. And we will see our next webinar, which is going to be, I don't know the date, but it's going to be with Flexa, who are the people who promote flexible working in the UK. And so I'm really looking forward to that too. Thanks very much. Have a great rest of the day and a good week. Take care.